The way we produce the wine has been completely different compared to the former owner. But one very important and key thing to mention is that, the terroir and the soil remain the same. And this is what makes the true identity of Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion. The expression of the wine is a little bit different because we have been changing and adding a few methods.
Sit back and grab a glass. It's Wine Talks with Paul Kay.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul Kay, and we are in studio today, beautiful Southern California, about to have a conversation with Thibaut Richard of Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion. Hey, give us a review. That's how podcasters keep their ego going. If you have nothing good to say, don't say it. I'd appreciate that, but subscribe to the show, and we will continue to bring you these crazy good conversations, as we will have today with Thibaut. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. And thanks for yesterday.
Thank you for coming.
An opportunity to taste some great vintages of, what I thought was really fun was tasting, and I told this to my wife when I got home, being able to taste the change from the proprietor, the propriétaire. You went from the 2011, which was the old regime, to the new regime, and being able to taste those differences.
Yeah, absolutely. We always like to provide this sort of exercise to the people, and especially because the main reason around that is to obviously show all the progression and transformation we had at Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion since the Pichet family purchased the estate in 2010. And I have to say that it's been a fascinating journey since 2013 vintage, really. With the new technical team on board.
When did you start there?
Myself.
Yeah.
Wow. I started, we say 7 months ago. So
wow.
It's a very recent thing for me. Voilà.
I did not know that. Did you say that yesterday?
No.
Oh, okay.
it's my secret.
Well, you sound like you'd been there forever. You do the history, right?
Thank you. I have to say this is my first podcast for Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion.
Well, welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
Where did you come from then? Bordeaux, a Bordelais house?
Yeah, I'm raised and born in Bordeaux.
Wow.
It doesn't mean I have stayed my whole life in Bordeaux because you need to travel a little bit to understand what happens in the world. But yeah, Bordeaux is my town.
So were you working in the wine trade at another right bank house or left bank house? Or?
Alors, to be quite frank with you, this is my first opportunity working in the chateau because I'm involved in this amazing business for, I would say, 12 years. Mm-hmm. But before being involved in the chateau and representing an estate, I was working for another actor of this filière, which is a négoce. And I have been negotiating for 10 years, I would say.
Well, that's an important part of our business, particularly, it's less done in America, though it is done a little bit, but certainly in the French tradition, négociants are a very important part of the wine trade.
Absolutely, and especially in Bordeaux. In Bordeaux, the négociant and the chateau have always been working hand by hand and in a great partnership together for decades, I would say.
Interesting to know, though. So, just for fun, I mean, how does one learn of a job that technical director of a chateau is as well known as Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion? They run an ad in the newspaper or something, or you had a friend that knew the job was opening, or they lost how did that happen?
Alors, just to clarify, I'm not the technical director of Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion. I'm the commercial director.
Commercial director, okay.
At Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion.
Right. Okay, très bien.
Voilà.
So how does one know that this job exists in this time? Like in America, you'd be on some website and you would be looking for work and you'd be trying to see what's going on.
I'm living in Bordeaux.
Yeah.
And Bordeaux is a village compared to Los Angeles,
true, yeah.
I would say. And it just, the opportunity came, it's a word and mouth.
Yes.
Voilà.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think that's important because my dad used to talk about in the picture that around the time you see in that picture, about the romanticism that the French are able to create around places, mythical places like Bordeaux. There's something very alluring about Bordeaux. And I took 12 people, my mistake, to ask 12 people to come with me to tour Bordeaux last June. But it worked out pretty good. And they fell in love with it. They had been not exposed to the culture, French wines as much, but there was what we in English would say hallowed ground. It's a very mythical, romantic place to be.
Yeah.
Was that attracted you to being part of a chateau and get?
Yeah. It was quite an objective in my wine career to be one day able to be responsible of the promotion of one single wine.
Mm-hmm.
It's true that when you are a negotiant, the objective is not like in a chateau where you need to make sure to make the entire promotion in the world for one single label. When you are a negotiant, you sell a tariff, you sell hundreds of different labels, and obviously at the end of the day, you cannot be as precise as you are when you are working to a chateau, because my only objective today is to make sure that Carmes Haut-Brion is well distributed in the world in partnership with the different negotiants who we are working with. So it's really exciting. It means also you can have a better focus on things you do. And I have never been closer to what I love, which is wine. When you work in a chateau, I believe one thing above all, which is the most important, is to have that passion and being able to share it as well.
And you did a great job yesterday doing that. I've been trying to convince my wife to let me come to France, Bordeaux or Burgundy. I won't exclude that, and be part of that. I only get 90 days to be in the EU, but I would take those 90 days and love to participate in the culture there. Not only my attempt to understand French and the study of Francophile study, but to learn that part of the wine trade. And you said something earlier, which I thought was interesting. I think it's important that you should not just stay in one area. You went out to other places to learn other cultures or learn other parts of France before you came back to Bordeaux. What did you do?
Yes, I have been living a little bit in China for
really?
quite a few months when I was younger. I have been living also, it's a little bit more exotic, in Tahiti, in French Polynesia.
Really?
Voilà. And I was involved in a way into wine when I was there, and various places around the world as well.
As a negociant or just as a traveler?
As a negociant, yeah.
Is that important, you think, in the wine trade to understand the approach to the world market, the way people buy, the way they think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's key. It's key because Bordeaux and the chateau I represent has to be global in its distribution, has to be shining absolutely everywhere, and has to be accessible for the most of people. So being aware of what's happening in the export market is really important. But it's also key and super important to be strong in its own market and domestic market.
Voilà. We're going to talk about that. That's a tougher animal. Patrice Pichet.
Yes.
What was? Is that a woman?
Patrice.
Yeah.
He is a man.
Oh, okay. I might cut that out, but
yes.
Because in English, Patricia is.
Oh yeah.
What was his motivation to be involved in the chateau? I mean, we know this is tough, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But
yeah,
do you know the motivation of Patrice?
I have an idea about the motivation of purchasing Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion.
Introductions in just a moment. Hey, have a listen to Luca Vitiello. This is a crazy conversation about a Tuscan winery in the Chianti region. Crazy because it was the second guest I've had on the show that came from Russia, who was in the Russian wholesale business and decided to open a winery. And the other show is coming out soon, but this one's about how they landed in the Chianti district of Tuscany, a fascinating conversation as well. Dr. Charlie Leary, who resides in Panama, not the quintessential worldwide wine scene, but becoming one. So listen to Charlie Leary, and he'll tell you why Panama is coming along.
Carmes Haut-Brion is quite a unique place in Bordeaux. This is a magic property. When you come to visit Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion, you really understand what it is. This is a very tiny, small vineyard which is located very close to the city of Bordeaux. It's a fun fact because we are the only property having a postcode in Bordeaux.
Really?
And we are literally 15 to 20 minutes from the city center.
That's close.
And we are what we call a urban vineyard. So when you are here, you are in the city, but when you are experimenting Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion and walking through the vines, you have a impression being in the countryside. So you are in the city, but you've got this feeling
that's interesting.
being to the countryside, and it's a very bucolic and romantic place, which has existed for 400 years, and you really need to come there to understand what it is. And I believe Patrice Pichet has be under the charm of this place.
Mm-hmm.
He's also the neighbor of Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion for some years. So I guess that every morning when he woke up, he had this view on Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion, and it was a sort of dream, certainly for him to be one day the proud owner of Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion. And the challenge was also quite high to try to, I was telling you yesterday that Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion for quite a few years was called the Sleeping Beauty of Bordeaux. And that challenge was to try to make sure that this Sleeping Beauty was transformed into something real, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Voilà. And try to make this Sleeping Beauty something unique.
Well, I can tell you, and we're going to talk about the process a little bit. I try not to talk about wine making too much, not to confuse listeners, but I think it's important to describe this change you made and then the style change. We'll do that in a minute. But you said come to visit. I want people the listeners to remember this or know this. We've been to Bordeaux a few times, and it seems like as time goes on, visiting Bordeaux is more approachable and easier to do. I can remember being in Bordeaux and no chateaux are open. There's no tasting rooms. There's no, a consumer experience to have. And that seems to be changing. You think that's motivation on the chateau or the district to teach the world about Bordeaux, or just to come to grips with the current wine tourism?
Alors, Bordeaux has always been, but has certainly more become a very attractive city.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the people, and it's very true with American tourists, when they come in Bordeaux, it's obviously for the beauty of the city, but not only. It's because of the wine tourism.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to play a role into that. And I believe it's super important to open the doors to people who want to discover our wines. And yeah, we are very enthusiastic about those people visiting us.
Well, because we were on the left bank, on the right bank, part of our trip, and part of the discussion was about the new rules for the classifications of the Grand Cru and Premier Grand Cru and whatever they call them there. And that they've added to this, and much to the, I think, chagrin of the wineries, is that they have to also include some kind of client experience, whether it's a hotel or rooms to rent or tasting room visits or restaurants, that hospitality is part of now the classification process.
Yeah.
Which kind of, it kind of flies in the face, or kind of is part of a redefinition of what Bordeaux is and was. But I think it's critical now that you offer these services.
Yeah, absolutely. this situation of that classification is quite interesting and has been a long debate in Bordeaux.
Yes.
This last few years, I guess. At Carmes Haut-Brion, we are not under any sort of classification,
Right.
which doesn't affect us really, because today, since the purchase of the Pichet family of Carmes Haut-Brion, I believe that the name Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion itself is stronger than any classification we could have. I'm not sure that the classification today still remain a selling point.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's important. Well, I think you're doing the right things. We talked about it. You can tell us now, but my 35 years of marketing wine and up until last year, digital marketing, internet marketing, influencer marketing, I mean, all the things that you must understand in today's world just to tell the story of who you are, and you're gonna tell me the story now, has come around, in my opinion, to experiential, and it's not unknown. It's known that the millennials, the Gen Zs, those generations like the experience. For instance, my son-in-law, my daughter, at least in their early adulthood, would have preferred $100 dinner than to save the $100 to buy a fun car. They saw experiences as more important than things.
Yeah.
And I think the wine industry is, I'm not going to say going backwards, going back to. And like we discussed yesterday a little bit about this patch, Les Amis de Vin, which was an organization throughout the country. There were 150 chapters, and people would come to dinner, like in that picture. And I think that's important for Bordeaux as well. I think the experiential part. So every time they open a bottle of Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion, they remember the story.
Yeah.
Or they remember the visit.
Yeah. I believe Bordeaux is part of those wine region in the world where we have a lot of different organizations who are responsible of making the promotion of our wines in every single appellation. For example, us at Carmes Haut-Brion, we've got the Syndicat Pessac-Léognan with playing a big part and a big role into the communication of our wines. And you've got plenty of other organizations as well. And it's really key, as you say, for people to experiment that. Yeah.
Because, I mean, what is the story of Le Carmes? It's a very old chateau.
Yeah.
You mentioned in yesterday's conversation that it was part of what we would consider Château Haut-Brion at some point. But how old is the vineyard? Not the vineyard, but how old is the chateau or the name? And what's the progress of what
Alors, Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion was just built by the end of the 19th century. Before that, it was called Le Moulin de Crespiac. Moulin means a mill.
Mm-hmm.
And indeed, it was a very long time ago part of Château Brion. And this is the owner of Château Brion, who was called Jean de Pontac, who in 1584 decided to generously give this plot of land to Les Carmes. And Les Carmes were religious people, they were monks, and they have been the first people being living in this land, I would say, because it was not yet known as an estate. And they remained there for 200 years. Voilà. And you can imagine that those people had different activities around the mill, also praying, but obviously as well cultivating and growing vines.
Mm-hmm. So interesting. I always fascinated with the monks all over the world, but particularly in the French countryside, Burgundy as well, that they were cultivating vines, that they determined the difference without any analytics, without any equipment. They were able to determine picking times, grape ripeness, terroir differences, the old way.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me. So it's contemporary history then, making wine under this brand, how long has that been?
What do you mean?
How long has Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion been making
Alors,
wine?
the place exists for 4 centuries.
Yes.
To date, the first bottle which was produced under the name Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion is a difficult task, but we have an idea, and it was certainly around the end of the 19th century.
No, so okay.
Under the name Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion.
Right.
Before, there were some bottles which were produced in this area, in the Clos des Carmes, but it was not under the name of Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion, because this is the Collin family who purchased the estate in 1840, who have been the first family responsible of bottling under the name of Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, it was bottled under a different name, which we ignore.
Was the chateau part of the Nazi occupation of World War II?
Not from what I know.
Yeah, so I mean the line, the line where they took over sort of meanders through Bordeaux. Some chateaux were involved and some were not.
Yeah.
I think Haut-Brion became I think the Luftwaffe rest home or something at some point.
Okay.
But that's interesting.
I'm not able to tell you.
For me, it's a really interesting part of history.
Yeah. And there is a very interesting book about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wine, the Kladstrups.
Yeah, I believe.
Wine award. They live in Paris.
Okay.
He's an American journalist.
Okay.
Very interesting people. So yesterday when we tasted the 2011, which there's this whole discussion, and I think the Master of Wine program, I've brought this up before, the Master of Wine program out of London has dropped the term Old World, New World. And I'm giving a speech on Thursday about Armenian wines, and I use the term because I think it's an important term. I don't think dropping it's a good idea. I think that Old World has not only a geographic position in life, like France, Italy, Sicily, they're all Old World. America, Australia, South America, New World, at least geographically, right? But it's also sort of a stylistic issue too. And I think that was a pretty good example yesterday when you poured the 2011, which was more traditional Bordeaux-esque, and the current wines, which are fabulous, complex, have all the character of representing terroir, but a slightly different profile.
It's true that the approach has changed a little bit. The way we produce the wine has been completely different compared to the former owner. But one very important and key thing to mention is that, the terroir and the soil remain the same.
Yes.
And this is what makes the true identity of Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion. The expression of the wine is a little bit different because we have been changing and adding a few methods under the great control of Guillaume Poutier, who is the managing director, and Guillaume de Schepper with his team, with the technical director. And it's true that our approach today at Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion is much more contemporary and modern than it used to be, and we are certainly one of those rarest property in Bordeaux using the techniques that we use.
That was very fascinating. Let's talk about why, and then we'll talk about the techniques themselves. Why do you think that is? What was seen by the technical director, the owner, everybody involved in the decision making at the chateau to say we're going to move in that direction? Is it the consumer?
No, because I believe when you start to produce wine for consumers, it means that you are not anymore a grower. It's just that you are creating a brand. And Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion, I don't believe that we position ourselves today as being a brand. We are growers, and what is fascinating is the way we will express the different varieties and terroir that we have naturally at Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion. It's just that when the Pichet family purchased the estate in 2010, they have massively invested in a few things, And one of those things has been the people. With Guillaume Poutier, we arrived in the middle of the harvest 2012. And when Guillaume arrived, he has been able to recruit a new team with Guillaume de Schepper as well as a technical director, and people who were able to follow his vision and philosophy. And this is what has been really marking the creation of a new chapter for the style of Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion. And clearly, their idea when they arrived was to try to redefine a little bit the way Carmes Haut-Brion should be produced. There is one sentence that they quite often use, is that a great wine should not become great. It has to be born great. And this is something which I believe is an obsession at Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion. And yeah, it's fascinating.
You know, I wrote that down yesterday when you were talking.
Yeah.
That a wine needs to be born great. And I came into the office this morning before you got here, and I sat down and I looked at my speech I'm giving on Thursday, and I added that.
Okay.
Because so I appreciate that, because it's an important statement, particularly in this world of wine with cans and Tetra Paks and non-alcoholic and low alcoholic and you know the regular supermarché wines that are, like we talked about yesterday, €2, €3 a bottle. You know that those are doctored up, played with, sugared, acidified, whatever they do to them to make them even semi-palatable. But your quote says it's born in the vineyard.
Exactly.
And that's where we have to get the good wines. And it's so refreshing to hear you say that we're not going to pay attention to the consumerism. Consumers are certainly important, and we want to make sure that they enjoy our bottle of wine, but we're not going to pay attention to the consumerism of it, the whole trends that go up and down all these years that we've been doing this. And that's a very refreshing point. And I use this term now called an honest glass of wine, meaning a glass of wine that is grown and vinted to represent where it's from and when it was.
Sure.
And I used this the other day with the gentleman from Bordeaux. And I said, you know, if under that definition, see if you agree with me, if under the definition that a true wine, an honest wine, is a keen representation of that vintage from that soil, that really there's no bad vintage. Because the definition would suggest as long as it represents the conditions it was picked in and the conditions it was grown in the soil, then it's proper, it's honest.
Mm.
I mean, some will taste different than others, but it's achieved its objective in representing a place and a time.
Yeah. This concept of having I use your word, a true wine, is that we believe that the consumer, when he comes to taste and drink our wines, we want this consumer to be embarked in our definition of what is Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion and what is Pessac-Léognan and what is Bordeaux. And it's to be true to itself, really. You know, at the chateau, we are just passengers because the chateau will always remain.
That's right.
And it's really important and key for the next generation when they are going to taste and try some Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion to say, well, this is Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion. Voilà. We have the chance sometimes to be able to drink and taste with various people some very mature and old Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion, and you can really taste the place. Voilà. Cabernet Franc has always been present, and what people were doing in the past, we just follow what they are doing, but with a few modification in the process, but that's it.
I think that's a really important point, and I say this a lot, but I think every generation, millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, LMNOPs, whoever they are, some might take longer than others to arrive at the value of that true glass of wine. we all drank things when we were kids, In America, there's Bartles and James wine coolers, soda and wine. And then there was Lancers and Mateus. And we had a thing called Cold Duck, which was a pink sparkling wine, but it was, sugared up.
Looks amazing.
Yes. I think I have a bottle here on the wall somewhere. Okay. And then eventually, you realize when you have that glass of wine that's complex and expressive, and you kind of go, well, gee, I'm not in America anymore. You realize there's something else to understand. And I think that's a really important point that you made about what your philosophy is at the winery, which is eventually they'll come to grips with, this is Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion, and this is what it should be like. But when you change the property of the profile of the wine a little bit, and then certainly I certainly sense that the 2011 and all the way through that what we tasted had this sort of thing character. 5 minutes? Okay. That you went through you're doing things like, and this is going to be a little bit technical for the listeners, but carbonic maceration or whole cluster fermentation, which is usually reserved for Beaujolais and Burgundies and Pinot Noirs in California. And here you are doing it with Bordeaux varietals. But I didn't get all that fruit like you usually get. I didn't get all that blueberry. I got wonderful, complex, dark fruit and all the different layers that came from that complexity. But it was interesting not to get all that bright fruit that comes from that typical maceration. It's an interesting process.
Yeah, so it's a process which has been put in place starting the vintage 2013, the whole cluster fermentation, where only a small part of the production is going to the distiller, and then we keep all the rest. It's a decision which was taken by the new technical team, and it's really important to mention that those two people, meaning the two Guillaume, Poutier and De Schepper, are both not Bordelais. And Bordeaux is made of cod.
Yeah.
And when it comes to break the cod, when you are not a Bordelais, it's certainly a little bit easier. And they were both coming also with a previous experience, which was with an important house in the Rhône Valley.
Yes.
And they were obviously more familiar than anybody with the wort cluster fermentation, because this is something we mostly do in this part of France, but also in Burgundy. So it was a little bit less challenging for them. And when that new cellar, which is designed by Philippe Starck, was built, they knew in advance that they wanted to use that new technique. The wort cluster fermentation is something which really mark our difference.
Mm-hmm.
And this is super important in the storytelling of Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion. And this is something we hardly defend and communicate, is that we are different. We are not like any of our neighbors in Bordeaux. And this is what certainly makes us quite interesting for the final consumer, because he's going to taste Bordeaux, definitely.
Yep.
Because we've got the color in the glass, we've got this density, but without being opulent. We've got this tannic structure. Mm-hmm. So you have the sensation of being in Bordeaux, but you also have the sensation of drinking something different, not only in the concept, but in the way it tastes.
Yes.
Voilà. And the obsession of Carmes Haut-Brion is really three simple things, and it's really our signature. This is the balance of our wines. This is the texture of our tannin, because the tannin, we never want this tannin to be too dry or astringent. We always want this tannin to be silky and soft and velvety. And this is finally the drinkability of our wines. We put a lot of obsession into those three concepts, and especially the drinkability, because you were talking about those young consumers who are the consumer of tomorrow, and obviously they are consumers we need to recruit at one point, and they are more immediate in the way they consume the wine. We have less and less people who are able to purchase a case and stock this in their cellar for 15, 20 years and being able to forget it and break this case after 15 years. When people today purchase a bottle, it's in the view of drinking it in the next months. And this is what we try to do. We are not saying we try to redefine a little bit the way Bordeaux should be consumed, but Bordeaux is a very fine wine region in the world, and we must offer to the final consumer the opportunity to drink a Carmes Haut-Brion 2019 if you would like, but without losing the Bordeaux DNA, which is the aging. They are wine with a massive tannic structure, but you don't feel it.
That was a great explanation, because I thought, one, the wines were both brands. Les Carmes was great value in the Bordeaux side, and we taste a lot of Bordeaux here, and I've seen a lot of entry-level Bordeaux's, and that was, in my opinion, one of the most structured, expressive of place that I've had here.
Thank you.
Through hundreds.
So you talk about the Cidre des Carmes.
Yes, Cidre des Carmes.
Cidre des Carmes Haut-Brion.
I thought it was a des Carmes. Cidre des Carmes, right there.
Yeah.
And then even at the price level, the price point of the Château brand was very good value compared to its counterparts. And yes, it was very approachable at this age. And we're being told to get off the stage. So, final thought. I really appreciate you coming. I know you've got a busy schedule. You headed to San Francisco today, and then you've got New York and some other places to go on this trip. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come in today and spend some time with us and tell the consumers about Château Les Carmes Haut-Brion. And you will see us soon in the Chateau.
You're more than welcome, and thank you to you, Paul.
I think March we're headed back to Paris, and I think I'm going to take a couple days off.
Okay.
And head down and visit.
Okay. When you want.
Cheers. Salut.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Take care.